Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you are watching or listening to this, and welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa Kinski, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Francois Jaffray. Francois, how are you doing today, dear?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing very well. How was your weekend?
It was fantastic. Got a barbecue in. I got to watch the fight last night, the Mayweather fight. How about you?
Oh, I didn't know there was a Oh, wait, was that a Mayweather-Logan Paul fight? I saw a meme about that. Okay.
It wasn't much of a fight, but that's for another conversation.
I feel silly asking this question because I know the answer, but who won?
Well, it was an exhibition. So the only time that there would be a winner if there was a knockout. And there was no knockout. Yeah, okay. They don't rack up points or anything. It was just, it was a money fight. They just make money.
Whatever. Anyway, no, my weekend was great. I watched two very good friends of mine get married, and I got to reconnect with a bunch of old friends from my study abroad. So it was incredible. Awesome. And we did not get rained on, which was awesome.
That's a plus.
That's all you can ask for in a wedding is to not get rained on. All right, well, let's go on ahead and jump into it. I'm really excited about our guest today. I think I reached out to her like months ago about getting her on. You guys have seen her everywhere. Today, we have with us Miss Kellianne Fedio from Amazing Exits and Foundry. Kellianne, how are you doing today?
I am doing great, Lisa. Thanks so much for having me. And hi, Francois, as well.
Hey.
Thank you again for coming on. I have to tell you, I have an actual note written under like your tab of our Asana project that says, after I watched your Branded by Women, I wrote, holy crap, I'm already ready to sell my Amazon business that I don't have. It's like, this is so informative. We have to have her on the show.
Oh my goodness. Well, that makes me very excited. 2021 has shaped up to be quite the year to consider selling your business.
Yes, it definitely has. So let's get into that. But first, let's back up for a second. Tell everybody a little bit about your background for those who may not be familiar with you. I think you've called yourself like a recovering lawyer. Am I saying that?
Yeah, that's my little joke. I say I'm a recovering attorney.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, I mean, I never would have expected, standing here now that I'd be in e-commerce and, in brand building and building brands, selling brands, acquiring brands. But here I am. But I did start out as an attorney and decided that career path wasn't something I wanted to pursue for like the rest of my life. I did practice law for 10 years in civil litigation. And then I got into e-commerce around 2013. I really fell in love with the idea of building a brand. And it was just about that time that a very prominent course called Amazing Selling Machine had come out, and it was all about teaching folks how to create their own brand and leverage the Amazon channel to sell products. And so I launched my brand in 2014 and scaled it pretty quickly to 7 figures. And I ran that business primarily as a solopreneur with a small team and took it to the level where I was happy with, and then had a successful exit in early 2020, right before COVID happened.
Good timing.
Yeah.
You make it sound so easy.
Oh yeah.
When you talk about things in the past, right, as an entrepreneur, everything sounds easy, right? But of course, nothing is a straight line up. There's like lots of peaks and valleys, and definitely have had many, many, many failures in my life.
Well, so let's take it back a little further. You said that when you were an attorney, you did civil litigation. So that's like bankruptcies, divorce, stuff like that?
No, it means just anything that goes through the trial system or the court system. So I did a lot of insurance defense work, which means I helped insurance companies represent their insureds when they were sued. So everything from personal injury to medical malpractice to construction defect, premises liability, employment law litigation, but anything that actually gets filed in a court and then you have to go through the discovery and ultimately potentially the trial process. That's what I did. And I did it all on the defense side.
Gotcha. I would love to swap stories with you. I don't know how much you can tell, but I worked in criminal background screening right after college, and I saw some wild stuff, and I'm sure you saw even wilder stuff.
Probably in the criminal side, you saw wilder stuff. I was on the civil side, so it probably isn't as tantalizing. But yeah, I loved criminal law as well. I interned for the Attorney General's office when I was in law school, and really thought that I was going to go into some kind of criminal work, but chose the civil side instead.
Well, even the civils, when you go through those civil cases, like for a divorce, I saw the whole text messages between soon-to-be ex-husband and wife, and man, those were insane. Wow.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So you said then you decided to go into e-com and you fell in love with the idea of building a brand. Were you like served an ad for the Amazing Seller Machine, or did you know somebody who did it? I mean, how did you, like, that's a hard left. Like,
it is a hard left. I kind of skipped a bunch in between there. So I got married, had children, and that was kind of the impetus for me deciding, okay, I practiced law for 10 years and thinking, like, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? Is this how I want to raise my children and have this kind of a lifestyle where I'm working 80 hours a week and not in control of my own time and destiny? And so I definitely took some time off to just, be with, my two small young girls at the time. And once they got into grammar school, I really started poking around, knew I wanted to do something internet based. And so did some random Google searches for, how to make money online and how to work from home. And of course you get, a whole onslaught of things, everything from multi-level marketing to, which I actually tried for a while, by the way. It gave me a really thick skin. Just internet marketing in general. So I tried like affiliate marketing, blogging, all these different things. And it was through that I got on a bunch of email lists and finally got hit up for this drop shipping course. And I took this drop shipping course. I can't remember the name of it now. But I started selling products, drop shipping them, of course, on eBay. And I started ramping that up to pretty quickly to at least like $10,000 a month in profit. But it was a grind. But I realized the power of just physical products and selling those online. But I knew that wasn't really a true business. I was just basically arbitraging from one platform to another and taking advantage of that spread. And so I knew that there had to be a way that I could think of to build a brand. And then it happened that I was on a list. I was actually on somebody called Ryan Moran's, his email list. And he was at that time one of the biggest affiliates for this course called Amazing Selling Machine. And once I saw that, I'm like, this is it, I'm doing it. And so took that course. It's preeminently known as the best course out there for, teaching how to sell on Amazon. And looking back now, the whole model was how to sell on Amazon. And I quickly knew that I don't want to just learn how to sell on Amazon. I definitely learned how to leverage the Amazon platform to sell products, but I wanted to build a real business that had value. And just up until a couple of years ago, these Amazon businesses, which I hate that term, but they didn't really have any value out there in the marketplace. And boy, has that changed, right?
And so question about, and I have this question on for a lot of people that took courses, how did that teach you about supply chain? Because going from drop shipping to more of this brand building and private label is a significant difference.
It sure is.
What did it teach you about sort of the supply chain side of things?
I would say that I learned about supply chain through experience and through trial and error. And that's the thing about learning how to build a brand online. You have to learn supply chain. You have to learn marketing. You have to learn so many other things, finances, right? And so as an entrepreneur, you're learning those things. I built the parachute on the way out from jumping out of the plane, I like to think. And I would say Amazing Selling Machine is just a great foundational course for all the things that it takes to get up and ready, launching a product on Amazon. But it certainly was not a deep dive into supply chain. I mean, basically probably a module about going to Alibaba, finding a supplier, and that was that. And back then, that's exactly what I did. And that's how a lot of e-commerce entrepreneurs get started, is by going to Alibaba. It's a great place to get started, but it's certainly not where you want to stay. And it's certainly not a full service supply chain management solution. I wish solutions like Novaland existed back when I was starting, because I had to kind of piecemeal it all together myself. And that's where I made a lot of failures. But, I did go to China several times. I found all of my suppliers. I had an actual pretty complex supply chain because I was selling a lot of different types of products within my brand. And so I had a lot of different suppliers and didn't have a supply chain manager until the very end, when I decided to hire somebody to be my supply chain manager when I was going to sell my business, because I knew that was going to be really hard to hand off to a new owner. So, the fact that you guys offer that, I think is fantastic and well needed in the space. And like I said, wish I knew about you guys back then.
We do too.
We're still fairly young, and the whole market is fairly young, right? It's still maturing is what we're seeing. We're seeing all this new money start to be poured in. Companies like Perch and Thrasio starting to, be able to pour money into an effective supply chain to scale that business to the next level, to take it off of Amazon, for example, and just go international or go to have your own .com or whatever the case may be. But it's really to scale these businesses. When you were going through learning about supply chain and even going to China, how was that for you with your background in law? And obviously it still is a massive switch. What are some of the, I guess, the failures are just as important as the successes, I would say.
Oh, absolutely.
Are you asking how she negotiated, since she's a master negotiator?
Well, obviously she is, but just sort of, would you mind walking through that process just a little bit?
Sure. And I think that studying to become an attorney and practicing law molded me to be a very analytical person. So I'm really good with analyzing large amounts of data and then analyzing that data and then drawing conclusions. But negotiating with the Chinese was definitely night and day from negotiating on a case, right? And I probably didn't do that very well either. Really, the first time I went to China, I went on a group trip, and that trip was supposed to be helping you learn how to source and, negotiate and do all those types of things. But my very first supplier, backing up a step before I went to China, I met through Alibaba, and he actually was a sourcing agent. And I knew that at the time, and I knew that, eventually I'm going to need to get to the manufacturer, but I ended up staying with him the whole time, because when I went directly to the manufacturer, this is another big mistake I made. There was so much loss in translation because they didn't speak English. They didn't have a representative. So like quality control issues, all that stuff. I found that having that sourcing agent, basically a one-man trading company, he was able to handle so many of the little things that I just could not do just due to the language barrier and all of that. So he was the supplier for my best-selling product. And the cost, everybody always says, oh, you have to go direct to the manufacturer. And that's not necessarily always true, because if the sourcing agent or the trading company is providing a level of service, and if that adds 20 cents to your cost of goods sold per unit, isn't it worth that, right? Versus saving that 20 cents and then having to deal with all that headache. So I think it's an evolution. It's an iterative process. If you're just getting started selling online and trying to create a brand, you're probably you're not going to be able to go right out necessarily and work with the Novaland. I'm not sure, or, maybe finances wouldn't allow, but you're going to be bootstrapping it. So you're going to go to Alibaba, you're going to try to do it yourself. And then eventually you're going to realize, oh my God, this is like so much work and so much back and forth. And then that's just for one supplier. If you have several suppliers, it's so much to manage. And I truly believe it's the operational aspects of these businesses, like supply chain, that can make or break a business. And in the Amazon selling world, everybody likes to focus on all the sexy topics, the marketing and PPC and ranking for keywords and launches and reviews, right? But what about the operations and what about the financials? And especially if you're going to build a sellable asset, you need to have those things streamlined. And so many entrepreneurs get into this not knowing anything about that. I didn't. And learned as I went. And like I said, made many mistakes.
You are speaking directly to Francois's heart right now.
You are. I mean, everything that you said, even the fact that supply chain is not sexy. It is the foundation of any business that sells physical product, and particularly a business that's reliant on this e-retail space, this online selling, where you don't even see the product yourself. Most of the time, you just ship it either directly to Amazon or to a 3PL. They handle all that for you, and then it goes direct to a consumer. So you have this huge reliance on all of the partners every step of the way to make sure that link is perfect for the next link, and that it's just going to keep going.
Yeah, and it's a wonder that a gajillion things don't go wrong, right?
Right.
Like COVID.
Yeah. And those horror stories have happened to many a seller. Like I even had one story I'll share because I didn't have supply chain management in place, is I had quality fade with my best-selling product. So even with that trading company that I mentioned, who was a very trusted resource for me, he wasn't doing his due diligence with the factories over, doing multiple shipments and inspections and things like that. And slowly but surely, they started to compromise on the quality of the materials. And it was a very subtle, innocuous thing that, didn't really present itself for a year when all the negative reviews started coming out. And now all this inventory is mixed in with other inventory. And so solid supply chain, including quality inspection, including making sure that, quality inspections are done every single order, every production run, sometimes, not only just pre-shipment, but during production is very important. It depends on the type of product. So there's so many facets to supply chain management, right? It's not just the sourcing. It's like the inspections. It's like you said, the logistics. And then also optimizing the efficiencies of all that and the costs of all that, which affect your bottom line and affect what you can sell your business for and how much money you put in your pocket at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Yeah. How significant is supply chain to exiting? And I definitely, obviously, we're here to talk about exits. And you exited a very successful business. And I heard you on Yanni's show from Gatita also. You had an amazing past in those first 90 days, scaling that up to a 7-figure. But that's insane. Not too many sellers have that.
That's
success.
where my negotiating power came in, though, because I was able to negotiate terms with my first supplier. That's why I was able to get the inventory to be able to sell that much.
Gotcha.
Okay. Well, can we walk through that? How did that all go along? I know that happened in 90 days, which is a very, very, very quick time.
Well, it was Q4. It was Q4. So.
Okay.
Yeah. And
still.
Yeah. No, it still was. It was very lucky. There's a lot of luck involved because I had my first product that I decided to build this brand around. At that time, the demand, I would say, was probably low to medium demand. But I knew it would be a good flagship product for the brand. And I knew it was an evergreen product. And I knew that there were different ways that I could market it. Primarily at that time, I was thinking I could market this as a gift item. So not just what the product itself was. And so that Q4, I really marketed that as a gift item and ranked for all kinds of gift keywords. And so that's another reason why I took off that and being able to negotiate payment terms with my supplier so that I did not have to pay him for all this inventory until after Q4. And that's not typically very common when you're first working with a supplier. That can be very difficult, certainly. And I had never met him in person. I had since met him in person, but when I first asked for that, I didn't. But I made a pitch. I made a sales forecast. I convinced him, we're going to make this much money during Q4. I believe I can 10x what the demand is now and with this marketing strategy. And he bought into it and he took a chance on me.
Can we ask what category was that product in?
It was in sports and outdoors.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. I don't like to reveal the actual, I have on other product, but just for the buyer's sake, I don't like to reveal the product.
Oh, for sure. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, that level of depth that you went into with your supplier is something that we don't see too much of today. To be completely frank, with a lot of sellers that do want to go into negotiations, they sometimes, from more of the supply side, we might see someone that comes in and just says, "Hey, I just need better terms," or "Hey, I need 5% less," and it's not. I wouldn't say it's too much to just ask why, and it's not because no one doesn't. There's not enough, meat in the sandwich to take out and give everyone a sandwich. No, it's just where is this going to benefit me as a supplier? Right?
Exactly. The way I look at it is, again, there's so many facets to building a brand and selling products on these different online channels, including Amazon. There's so much to it. Sourcing, supply chain, that is, people spend their whole lives learning that stuff, right? How are you going to go in and get your PhD in that? And so as with anything in this business, you find out what you're really good at. You treat your business like you're the CEO and you figure out what you're good at. And then you outsource and delegate the rest as you scale, right? And supply chain management is definitely one of those things that I believe everybody, unless that's your specialty, should be outsourcing.
Very good.
And so
Once you
bringing
learn
that-
the basics, right? Once you learn the basics.
Yeah, and I mean, just like
Perfect.
any CEO, most CEOs know the basics of most of what's going on in the company.
Yep.
I mean, at least, they know what sort of marketing strategy they're going into, or, what type of messaging that they're going after, because they are the face of the company. But going into exits a little bit, what are some of the key foundations to an exit? And I guess what even is an exit? I know it's, in simple terms, it's just selling your business, but do you sell it with the expectance of them rebranding it, or are there different types of exits?
Yeah, so you've asked a lot of questions in there, so I'm going
I
to try
did.
to unpack that. I'm going to try to unpack that a little bit. So there are many ways to exit your business, and there are many ways you can structure a deal for the sale of your business. Generally, the sale of a e-commerce brand or a digital brand is structured as an asset sale. So you're not selling your company, you're selling the assets of the company, which are basically your inventory and any intellectual property that you have and your goodwill, basically. So that means things such as customer list and organic rankings and things like that. But like I said earlier, just a couple years ago, there wasn't even a market for businesses that were doing, 99% or more of their sales on just the Amazon channel. That was considered to be too risky. And now, even if you're doing all of your sales on Amazon, there is a market for you to sell your business. And in terms of the types of acquirers that are out there, there are many, but one of the biggest ones that gets all the news these days are what are called lumped together as the aggregators. And Thrasio was really the first on the scene as an aggregator. We all know how successful they've been, but this is not a zero-sum game. There are plenty of great businesses out there, and there are plenty of businesses that are just getting started today that are going to grow, that are going to, need to exit at some point. And so there are so many other now acquirers out there or aggregators buying these businesses. But in addition to the aggregators, depending on the size of your business, there's also private equity that are buying these businesses. There are family offices that are buying these businesses. There are individual entrepreneurs, corporate refugees who want to get out of the corporate rat race that are buying these businesses. There are strategic acquirers. So there's a lot of different options, and it depends a lot on your business and the risk factors and the level of profit that your business is spitting out, to see like what kind of acquirer is going to be best for you. So I think that answers the first part of your question. And then when you asked about like, what is an exit? Well, an exit is selling your business. But like I said, there could be many different ways to structure that deal. You might sell 80% of the business and keep 20%, rolled equity, meaning you're keeping some ownership. Or you might sell 100% of the business, but then have what's called an earnout, where you're paid some cash up front and then you don't get the rest of the money from the deal until over time. And it's all, based on certain performance metrics that you agree to with the buyer. So that's hopefully generally answers the questions that you asked. And we can get into more specifics, of course.
No, absolutely. That was very succinct. And
I'm on my third cup of coffee. I'll be completely honest.
good heavens.
Oh yeah, me too. Me too. Gotta have that coffee.
And I ran out of my lower caffeine coffee, so I'm hippity hoppity on the 150 milligram.
Coffee.
My
His
mushroom
Joe
coffee.
Rogan coffee.
Yeah.
But what are some of the components that a seller has to consider before even selling their business?
Great question. So the most important thing is having clean financial records. I can't stress that enough. That's something we talk about on the podcast all the time. And now I'm working with an acquirer, and we can't even get the conversation started if we don't have financials to look at. When I mean financials, I mean a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet. I mean, these are all like business 101. You have to have clean bookkeeping, clean financial records, in order to be able to present a picture to a potential buyer of what kind of revenue and profit this business is doing. And it's amazing how many e-commerce entrepreneurs I've met that don't have good bookkeeping. They're doing it themselves on some Google sheet or Excel sheet. And you really need to have a bookkeeping service, keeping your books, and a good accountant, preferably an e-commerce accountant. And there are, just like there's so many different service providers that have grown in this industry. There are great e-commerce bookkeepers and there are great e-commerce accountants out there. So unless you are a bookkeeper or an accountant, even if you are, I would still recommend you outsource that. It's not a good use of your time. The best use of your time as a brand builder is coming up with new product ideas and launching and ranking those products. That's what it comes down to. Everything else, in my opinion, should be outsourced. So that's the first thing. And then there are, many other facets that can make a business more valuable, but I want to talk about it in a broader sense first. When a buyer is looking at your business, they are looking for risk factors. So the more risk they can find, the less money that they're going to offer you, right? So the more you can do to de-risk your business, the higher theoretically your valuation should be. But typically in businesses of the type that we're talking about here today are financial transactions, meaning that a buyer is looking at how much profit or EBITDA or seller's discretionary earnings, they all kind of mean the same thing, but how much profit that business is kicking off every year or for the past 12 months, which is really the most important time period to look at. And then they're going to apply some multiple to that trailing 12-month profit. And that is going to be how they come to a valuation. But there's many nuances in the risk factors that they see. The more risky, the less the multiple will be, if that makes sense.
And what's an example of some of the risks that they look for?
Well, one of the risks could be, lack of supply chain management, too complex. It could be a solopreneur, for example, who has 10 different suppliers and no real supply chain management practices in place or standard operating procedures in place. And so, I could plug in supply chain management there, but it really, if you don't have systems around your business, it's really hard to then transfer that business. And, the more transferable and sustainable your cash flow is, the higher your valuation is going to be. So having systems and processes in place is important. And being able to then show to a new owner that they're not going to have to go through a lot of work to take that over. Now, certainly with the aggregators, a lot of them will overlook this type of thing because they have their own supply chain management in place. But I'm telling you from my perspective as an exit advocate and also working with the acquirer that I work with, the more easily transferable any one facet of your business is, the higher the valuation is going to be.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, the time to start paying attention to your risk factors and, your supply chain and stuff isn't when you want to sell your business. It's when you start your business, right?
Exactly. And I'm so glad you mentioned that because I really, really am passionate about trying to impress upon brand builders that they need to have an exit strategy from the day they start their business. Now, I realize that nobody does this. I think people are starting to wake up to this now and they're starting to realize, wow, these businesses are true assets that I can sell. So if I start with the end in mind, I can build this up and then get a 4, 5, 6x on my profit. Like that is a path to wealth creation and financial freedom. So I think people are starting to understand that. Hopefully with our podcast, getting these types of sentiments out has been helpful. And there's obviously been lots of chatter in the Amazon and e-commerce seller community about exiting and selling your business. But that is such a great point. And we really stress that you need to be proactive and you need to start planning. And boy, is that not sexy, right? Like planning for something, like actually having business forecasts and, growth, having a solid growth strategy and planning out your product pipeline a year in advance. The more planning, the more organized, the more clean your business is, and the more that you can paint the picture for a potential buyer of clear growth opportunities, again, the higher the valuation for the business.
Other people might not think that's sexy, but for a type A planner like me, I love it.
I just thought about that.
Me too.
It's funny that you mentioned that because a lot of what you did mention are part of podcasts that I've heard, 5, 6 years ago. So I listened to Masters of Scale and Gray Matter, and these are more of, they might have Airbnb on there. And these are conversations that, Brian Chesky has about how when they first started LinkedIn and what they had to plan through as a startup, because that's what really all Amazon businesses are. They're just startups. But I mean, how do you plan for something that you don't know? Like, I guess, you're going into Amazon. What resources are out there to even know what to plan?
Now you're talking about for how to, like, for sales forecasting purposes?
Well, for sales forecasting, as well as, let's say, how to create a P&L, how to, who to have be part of your organizational structure as you scale up. Are there resources out there? Are there companies out there that help you do this?
Actually, there is. There is a wonderful company, my good friends, Yoni Kosminski, and do you know them?
With a Scala?
We know Yoni, yeah.
And Multiply Me. So actually, I met Yoni, last year. We had him on the podcast, of course, and we've become great friends. And we actually hired them in my role at Foundry, which is the acquirer that I work with, to help build internal systems and processes for, some of our brands. Some of them, we already have that systematized, but they offer, between their two companies, Scala and then Multiply Me, they help create systems and processes for your business. And then they also have an end-to-end hiring solution for Filipino staff and talent. So there is a resource for everything out there now. I mean, there wasn't when I got started. And so it really is about being strategic. And, most of us start these businesses on a shoestring budget. So you can't go hire an Scala or, right away necessarily. But, planning for that, like once you find traction, and I'm gonna emphasize this so much, like build a brand. And when I say build a brand, build something that has a pool of loyal fans who are looking for products from you specifically, and serve that market, serve a need versus just picking a product and selling it. You can make money doing that, but you're not going to have, these businesses are selling these product-based companies, but in the long term, they're not going to have as much value. So there are resources for everything. You mentioned bookkeeping, hire a bookkeeper, listen to great podcasts like this one and others that share information about resources. That's one of the things we aim to do at our podcast, is to have on all the different service providers, a curated, vetted list of service providers in all the facets of things you'd need to build and scale an e-commerce business.
And how long have you been running your podcast for?
We are relatively new as well. We launched in September of 2020.
Okay.
And so relatively new. And, I'm telling you, I was the first one on this whole exit planning, gravy train, so to speak. Like when I was going through selling my business, I realized, there is no content. There is no expertise out there about how to sell your business. There's tons of stuff on how to start a business and how to sell on Amazon and how to sell physical products, but where is the education on how to sell a business?
Yep.
And so I, was talking to my good friend, Paul Miller, about this, and he has a very successful brand. And he was like, you know what, we should start a podcast about this. He's like, I'm looking to exit my company someday, and I made a lot of mistakes, and he had missed his golden opportunity to sell it when he could have, and so had to kind of regroup. I sold my business, and so we started the podcast. And then since then, it's become the topic du jour of every Amazon podcast, Clubhouse,
it really
how
has.
to sell your Amazon business, right? So
it really has. I think that's like the second top conversation you see now.
Yep.
Second to PPC, of course. That's
yes.
the sexy stuff.
PPC, another sexy topic, but selling your business sure has become sexy, right?
When you add money signs to anything.
Yeah. That's that's the key thing. Everything's about the sexy side, and we have to talk about the non-sexy side, which also is, and I hate to keep tying it back in, but the supply chain. What did you do in your business differently, aside from hire a supply chain manager, to make your business not profitable, but I guess sexy to buyers?
Well, that was one of the main things. So again, if you're looking to sell your business, ideally you want to start planning from the beginning, but then second best to that is start planning at least about a year out from when you want to actually go to market with your business. Okay. And so I started that process. I launched my business in 2014. And then I was having significant growth in top line revenue. had some plateaus, but then it wasn't until 2018 that I realized I had to focus on profitability, not just the top line. And I think people are starting to wake up to that too. We all talk about, oh, I'm a 7-figure seller, I'm an 8-figure seller, yada, yada. It's like, what are you actually putting into your pocket at the end or whatever? That's what matters, right? And so I spent all of 2018 trying to increase my bottom line, which meant everything from cutting losing products to tightening up my supply chain, which I was just doing on my own then, to, not really launching any new products during that time, cutting expenses where I could, optimizing my PPC, all that kind of thing. And then 2019 was the year that I honed in on, okay, what are the, 1 to 3 biggest levers that I can pull to grow top line and bottom line? Because the year that you go to market, you want to be able to show the trailing 12 months as having increased your profit, okay? Not just your top line. Anybody can increase top line, throw more advertising at it, run some promotions, whatever. It's increasing that bottom line. You need to show that. And you need to show that there's an upward trajectory there. So I really focused on supply chain. And then I also focused on PPC, which at that time I did myself. But I did spend a lot. I don't usually recommend people do that themselves, but I really took I love Amazon advertising and PPC, and I've always taken an interest in it. So I felt like I had an expert level of knowledge on that. And it's something I felt that I was good at. So those are the 2 levers that I worked on to increase my sales and my profitability.
And what did you, obviously you had several suppliers. How did those conversations go? Did you let them know 12 months in advance also that this was your plan? Do you sell that relationship also to the buyer?
Well, what I did was I hired a supply chain manager who, they actually had several factories. So I basically then sourced, I dropped on my previous suppliers because I sourced all my products now through this new supply chain manager who had all the factories. And obviously that's not a ship that you just turn right around, because we had to go through product samples and make sure to get the quality right and all of that. So that took a good year to get that all down. And then not only did that streamline the supply chain, because they handled everything from logistics to warehousing to sourcing, quality control, all of that, but also brought my cost of goods sold down. And that's one of the biggest levers that you can pull to increase your profitability, is if you can reduce your cost of goods sold while maintaining your quality, of course.
I think it's interesting listening to everything that you did leading into selling your business. You said dropping off the less successful, products and optimizing your PPC, because kind of after COVID happened, now with what Amazon is doing with the warehouses, trying to make them strictly, distribution centers and limiting the quantity, not by the ASIN, but by your, whole account, essentially, they're trying to make people take their less successful stuff. So it's like you were 18 months ahead of everybody else before you were forced to do it.
God.
So kudos to you.
I don't know about that. Amazon has always been punitive when it comes to storing stuff at their warehouse in the form of long-term storage fees, right? And then, I feel so blessed and lucky that I did not have to deal with all of the, what do they call it? The IPI, all the different inventory restrictions that Amazon placed on sellers post-COVID. That is super challenging. And that even solidifies the whole point that you need good supply chain management practices in place, because you have absolutely, in these days and ages, you have to have a 3PL. You do not store all of your stuff at Amazon. You have to be able to forecast, when that inventory needs to be, not only arrive at the 3PL, but then, sent into Amazon. With all these restrictions, it's very complex, in my opinion.
And how are businesses navigating today's supply chain? Because today's supply chain is unfortunately, not 2018's, not 2019 supply chain. Today is the most chaotic supply chain I've ever seen. I haven't been in this for as long as most, but I've done it every single day for the past over 5 years. And I personally love supply chain. I kind of nerd out about it. But what are you seeing differently, or how businesses are handling that shift in this new era of supply chain, I would say?
Well, I wish I could say that all sellers are hiring great supply chain management resources, but a lot of them are just shooting from the hip. And what happens is a lot of them have had massive stockouts and massive loss in sales, and nothing is going to kill the value of your business than a stock out. You can't tell a potential buyer, oh, if we had been in stock, we would have sold, 200,000 more of profit in products. That doesn't fly. So avoiding stock outs is so essential in this business, not only for the lost sales, but the detrimental impact that has on your keyword rankings when you're out of stock, even for a few days, not to mention a few weeks. So I think people are starting to wake up a little bit to the fact that they have to create systems and processes around supply chain, whether you do that internally within your organization, build out an org chart and do that and hire somebody, or hire an agency like yours. I think people are starting to realize that those options exist. So that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But how do they forecast appropriately for this chaos?
It's very, very, very difficult. Very difficult. So a very good friend of mine, I'm not giving this a plug, but her name is Chelsea Cohen, and she has a software.
Amazing. So stocked. We had her on.
Yes.
We had her on the show.
So, I would say she was like the first one in on like the importance of inventory management, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what we're talking about here is inventory management, and having some sort of a software solution around that. So I highly recommend that software. Again, didn't exist when I was selling. Amazon has gotten a little bit better with their own internal reporting, giving you, and I'm no expert in how to manage inventory in this today's climate. Like it's complicated. Like it's difficult, but you definitely need to, you always want to look at your prior sales history, and that's complicated by COVID, because a lot of people had huge bumps, right? If I could give one piece of advice, I would say always err on the side of having too much inventory, but just have a 3PL to keep it in. And there are all kinds of creative things you can do. If you have good supply chain management practices in place, like you can, if you're manufacturing overseas, you can see if your supplier will store some of the inventory for you, like produce it, but then store it there and not pay until it ships. And then, with high-speed vessel, you can get it over here quickly, things like that. That would be my advice.
If the Suez Canal isn't blocked.
Yeah, well, the high-speed vessel is taking just as long as normal.
I know. And we haven't even talked about that. Like I said, I am so glad that now that I'm not running my own brand, it's different when you're running somebody else's brand. So like part of my work with Foundry, I'm mostly in the acquisition side of the house, but I also have helped integrate our brands and manage brands. And it's very challenging in today's climate. So you definitely need the right systems to do it.
Mm-hmm. And the right partners. Sellers funding, for example, didn't exist a few years ago. So that's something that can help a ton of businesses with stocking inventory.
Exactly. Yeah. And so capital obviously is a huge thing. And that brings it over to the financial side of, you need inventory to grow. You need cash for inventory. You need capital. And how do you get that capital? We just had a call with Sellers Funding last week, and I'm good friends with Tim Jordan as well. He's on their board, and there are other funding solutions out there now. So it's analyzing all of that too, like what's going to make the most sense for your business and your profit margins and your bottom line. What kind of funding and capital solutions are you going to take on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes it a little bit more complex, I would say, because then you would have to transfer.
I think that's the takeaway we have here, right? Like, the financial part of it, the inventory management part of it, not to mention all the other things you have to do in a business, which, you would ask the question earlier, Francois, about like, do you build an org chart? And I say, absolutely you do. Whether you're going to be a one-man show, then you're going to put your name under all those different hats, right? But you need to build an org chart for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then that even gets more complex when you expand off of Amazon.
Yes.
So today, when you speak with brands and they're planning on exiting, how significant is being off of, or I guess being more of this e-commerce agnostic rather than just Amazon specific?
Great question. And just a little over a year or two ago, I would have said, oh, it's very important that you build a three-legged stool, that you don't just rely on Amazon for all your sales, because that's too risky. But as we know, with all these aggregators, they're looking for primarily Amazon-based sales. So right now, if you are selling 100% on Amazon, you have a humongous opportunity to sell your business at a life-changing, life-altering multiple, in my opinion. But having said that, if you're looking to build a business to sell to, let's say, private equity or strategic acquirer, then it becomes very important to have sales channels that are diversified and not just reliant on one channel like Amazon, because the risk is there. Amazon shuts you down, you're done.
Do you find that most folks who exit their Amazon business actually like take the money and run and live on the financial independence and stay out of the game? Or do you think they get hooked on that flip and keep doing it?
I know a lot of sellers that are just making this their business model now, starting a business, getting it to a certain level and selling. And that can be the path to financial freedom. And it depends on, everybody's different. It also depends on your age. Obviously, if you're 30 years old, I doubt you're going to just do that and retire. You might go travel for a while, but I like to look at it as having lots of mini retirements. Like each time you do this, you can take a few months off. But if you're like me, and you're truly an entrepreneur, you're never going to stop working or building something, right? Because it's just in your DNA and blood.
Right. Yeah, that's like my dad. He was an entrepreneur and he hasn't owned a business in a very long time, but we have rental properties and he's going to be 70 this year and the man literally never stops moving. Like he can't stop doing anything.
And vibrant too. You've got to keep that brain working too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What sort of multiples are we seeing for Amazon business, purely Amazon businesses today? And I know there's a lot of factors to take into consideration.
There are a lot of factors, and everybody always wants to know this. And let me preface it by saying, to the brand builders out there that are looking to sell their business, doesn't matter what the multiple is. It matters, are you getting the ultimate price and terms that you want for your business? So most of these aggregators, they're not going to give you all cash up front. They're going to give you some, piece of it in cash, and then you're going to have some kind of an earn-out or performance-based metrics to, determine whether you're going to get the rest of those funds. So at the end of the day, I don't like people to get too hung up on the multiple. They need to think about in terms of, okay, what do I want out of this business long-term and why? And what amount of money do I need to land in my bank account after paying off all of my, whether it's debt, expenses, and also taxes, that's going to give me satisfaction, in life. That's what's most important. But having said that, I would say right now that multiples are definitely, have been creeping up. I would say that they're borderline, inflated right now. It's a seller's market. So, if you're a seller and you're considering selling, now is the time to do it. And I always tell people, don't get greedy. Like, don't think, I can run this business, for another 12 months and I can, blow it up by 10x and then I'll sell. Like once your business goes flat or declines, your business pretty much becomes unsellable. You can sell it, but it's going to be for a much, much lower amount. And so to answer the question, I would say right now, multiples are ranging anywhere in the high 3s to, dare I say, low 6s for Amazon-based businesses.
Wow.
Which is crazy. It's really crazy. Like a lot of the aggregators are just, in my opinion, overpaying just to acquire this bottom line cash flow, because they're just gonna, it's a arbitrage for them. They're gonna trade it all in, because once you have more EBITDA at the bottom or more profit, you can trade it for a higher multiple, right? The company that I work with, we're looking to build lasting, enduring brands. We're not looking for the short term. We are only looking to acquire probably 10 to 12 brands in this next 12 months. And we're looking really for the cream of the crop, like the best brands out there. So.
Mm-hmm.
And then with those brands, so if someone was using, let's say, Multiply Me, and I forgot to ask this question to Yanni before, but if someone's using Multiply Me and they sell their business, does that transfer over all of their overseas staff as well?
Yes. So it just depends on, typically if you're working with like virtual assistants and things like that, it would. But that's another thing that I just kind of have to highlight, with the company that I'm working with, Foundry, is that we're very founder centric and want our founders to stay on and participate and help grow the company. But in these larger transactions, I would say it's very important, especially if you don't have systems. If you don't have systems, then you've got to have employees or something that go with it, right? To keep the business running smoothly, at least during a transition period, So if you're using Filipino talent, that could certainly transfer. You would have to make that arrangement with the actual worker and make sure that they wanted that, but assuming that they did.
Right. Right. Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in and exit.
It's a lot to plan for. That's why, there's so many great resources like your podcast, my podcast, and resources out there to help brand builders navigate all of this, because it is a lot. And there's the everyday running of your business, and then there is the working on your business, which is zooming out and looking at it strategically and trying to figure out what is the long-term vision for this business. Do I want to grow this to 8 figures? If I'm going to, going from 0 to 7 figures is a lot different than going from 7 figures to 8 figures. To go from 7 to 8 figures, typically you're not going to just be a solopreneur. You're going to have employees, and you're going to have processes and all of that kind of stuff. And, for example, when I built my business to 7 figures, I didn't want to take it to that next level. I wanted to pass the torch, and I wanted to have a mini retirement, which is what I did. And I wanted to de-risk. I didn't want to have a big portion of my family's, financial well-being tied up in the business, which it always is in these types of businesses because of the inventory. I constantly had, capital loans out for inventory, and it just became too risky at some point. And I was like, I'm going to sell while I'm showing this upward trajectory, right?
Yes. Very smart. And what do you think, other than not preparing for the exit from the beginning, what do you think is the biggest mistake that sellers make when they're looking to exit their business?
Well, apart from having clean financials, which is super important, I would say really, and we talked about the planning, which is super important, but the biggest mistake, I would really say that they're not focusing on the bottom line. People are starting to become educated to that now, but they're still looking at their top line and how to grow their top line sales. And that is insignificant when it comes to selling your business. It all depends on that profit. So even like cutting an expense, like if there's a software that you haven't used for a few months and you're spending $100 a month on that software, well, in a year's time, that's $1,200. If you were going to be getting a 4-time multiple, that's almost $5,000 that you'd be losing with just the cutting of that expense. And then I would say the other biggest mistake, and I certainly was guilty of this as much as I tried, is to not be constantly assessing and streamlining your product mix, making sure that, capital is always limited. It doesn't matter how big your business is, it's always limited. So if you've got products that are, reaching the end of their life cycle, maybe their profit margin has gone down, the ROI isn't there, think about reallocating that capital to new product development.
Very good tip. Very, very good. Well, Kellianne, we've learned so much from you in just this short hour.
I don't know about that, but this has been fun.
I feel like there's still so much more.
You can have me back. I'd love to have you on our podcast too.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
we would love
that.
Yeah.
And Paul Barron's part of your podcast, right?
Paul Barron is a very good friend of mine, and Paul Miller is my co-host. But Paul Barron, I work with him on a lot of projects, and he's helping with some things that we're doing over at Foundry as well. So he's awesome. Has he been on?
Paul Barron has. Paul Miller has not. But we've also had Paul Sonveld on. There's many Pauls.
Lots of Yannis, I know all the names. It's kind of, we all know each other though.
Yeah, well, he's awesome. That's all I was going to say.
Well, yes, they're all wonderful, and go on ahead and just take a moment to tell everybody. We've talked about Foundry a little bit, we've talked about your podcast a little bit, but let's take a few minutes just to plug both of them. Let folks know, all about Foundry. Mostly, you said you're looking for the cream of the crop, so let's outline what you do in both of those spaces.
Sure. So let me start with Amazing Exits, because that's how this all kind of got started. So I founded the Amazing Exits podcast with my co-host Paul Miller. We launched back in September of 2020, and we aim to just be the quintessential resource for all things scaling and exiting your business. Primarily we're talking about Amazon-based businesses, but also e-commerce businesses or digital businesses, digital brands, and really helping sellers to learn all the different things they can do, all the levers they can pull to maximize the value of what's probably their biggest asset, right? And so serving as an impartial voice to that. And we're not brokers. We're not, investment bankers. We are just looking to connect sellers with all the tools, tips, resources, service providers like you guys to help them profitably scale their businesses. And it was during the launch of our podcast that a very good friend of mine, a former Amazon leader named Kyle Walker, he has over 9 years of experience at Amazon. And he built the Amazon Exclusives program, and he built, and that turned into Amazon Launchpad. So he was responsible for $10 billion worth of brands running through his, system. And he was also an M&A at Amazon. Anyway, I knew him because I was in the program that he started at Amazon Exclusives. And when he saw that I launched the podcast, he reached out and he said, "Hey, we need to talk." And at that time, he was in the midst of fundraising with 3 of his co-founders to start a new company, which is now called Foundry. And we are an acquirer of digital brands. We do not consider ourselves an aggregator. We are, looking to build long-term brands. We are looking to partner with our founders, if they so choose. We would love to have them continue on building the brand, getting that second and third payday. Whether that's profit sharing or retained equity, we're all about creative solutions to really work with our founders. And, just to give a little plug for the other founders of the company, we have Stefan Haney, who was basically the tech genius behind much of what you see on Seller Central. He was at Amazon for over 17 years. And then our other founder, Tom Shipley, he has built beauty brands in, worth billions in the D2C space. And then finally, Matt Rhodes is our other founder, and it comes from the private equity world. So we have a really unique team, and I'm just so lucky to be on it. And my goal is not to force people to sell to Foundry. Like, if I'm here to guide sellers to all their options. But if they happen to be a good fit for Foundry, let us make you an offer. That's all I ask.
There we go. And we're going to have the links to both of those sites in the description of the video and the audio episodes. Amazing Exits is just that, amazingexits.com. And for Foundry, it is foundrybrands.com. Short, sweet, and to the point. Love them both.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, and where can folks get a hold of you if they have any questions about the information that you shared today? Just through the sites or LinkedIn?
Actually, I prefer, you can email me, of course, at any of those sites, but LinkedIn is a great place. Facebook, send me, if you try to friend request me on Facebook, send me a friend request and a message saying that you heard about me from here, because I just don't accept all friend requests usually. And then Instagram as well. Kellianne Fedio.
Perfect.
No phone number to text, nothing?
No
Carlos
phone
Alvarez
number,
gave us a phone
but, but once I get to know somebody, maybe I'll give them my WhatsApp, and then, we can.
There we go.
There you go. Yeah. Carlos is a different breed. Awesome, Kellianne. Well, thank you again so much. And for everybody watching and listening, if you liked what you heard today, please be sure to give us a like, comment, share, subscribe to the show, ring the bell for notifications. You don't want to miss any other conversations that we have with leaders in supply chain and e-commerce like Kellianne. So thank you again so much for being with us today. We really, really appreciate your time. And I know that this has brought so much value to our listeners.
You are too kind. Thank you so much. It's just been so much fun.
And we'll definitely have to have you on again soon.
Yeah, I would love that.
Perfect. Well, thank you, dear. Have a great day. Bye, everybody.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.